Good afternoon, moms of master books. Today, we're going to talk as far as our teaching tips go. We're going to talk about engaging dad in your homeschool, and it's a very big topic because every family dynamic is a little bit different. And so, what I'm going to talk about is examining kind of some basic assumptions from different people that we've dealt with in our walk with helping other families, where we've kind of settled as a family. And what I'm going to ask is, while I'm speaking, if there's anything that resonates with you, if you would give me kind of a thumbs up or that resonates with me. And what I'll say as well, I'm going to pick somebody to give a copy of Education Does God Have an Opinion? I'll tie that into what I'm talking about today. But if there's a thumbs up or just something that lets me know if something I'm saying doesn't resonate with you, throw it out, right? Eat the meat, spit out the bones. There is no one size fits all solution to this topic. So engaging dad in the homeschool, as we've come through a lot of years of helping families, we've seen so many different levels of dads that are involved. And I remember when I started, when we first started homeschooling, and I went to my first homeschool convention, and I saw these dads who were just, they were rock stars, so to speak, with their kids, and being very intimidated by that. And I don't know that I've ever actually reach the level that some of them have. So as we're talking about this, it's more just a, like I say, eat the meat and spit out the bones. Definitely hello to Carrie, Julie, Jessica. It's good to have you guys joining us. Okay, so a few basic foundations here that I would say when we're talking about dad's involvement in the homeschool. And a lot of times as we're dealing with families that'll come up to our booth or would come to us for advice or whatnot, there seems to be a big level of dissatisfaction in dad's involvement. It would be more that dad isn't involved. I wish he was involved more. You very rarely hear, I wish he was involved less. But the first thing that I would say is, faulty assumptions and expectations, we have to kind of understand that, right? That the way I was brought up, what society tells me my role is, because homeschooling is so integrated into the family, a lot of those things can be brought forward into the homeschool. And so my role as a father, my role as a husband can kind of pollute my role in supporting my wife in the homeschool effort. Homeschooling really is a mom sport. I mean, it's by and large, and that's a big by and large, because I know that there are dads who homeschool. I know that there are dads who are very involved, but a lot of times because of the family dynamics where dad is working or dad is traveling or dad is not home, the burden of homeschooling falls on mom. And so then we have this education component, and we kind of bring forward a lot of our stereotypes and expectations and assumptions into that, and it muddies the waters. And so one of the first things I would say is, as I begin to talk and we have dialogue, and you're thinking about this and you're discussing it with your spouse, to definitely begin to question the assumptions and the expectations that you have. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. And I'm going to keep it kind of broad, because I realize in a group this big that we have a lot of different dynamics and beliefs as it comes to the roles of a husband and a wife, and how those dynamics should play out. But in a homeschool, in our home, I had a lot of faulty assumptions that I brought forward. And so I have to keep rolling my mouse. I brought things forward instead of having a healthy perspective on the homeschool, so to speak. And so hopefully I'll be able to explain that a little bit more. So faulty assumptions and expectations, we have to be careful that if we bring anything forward from the way we were raised, or stereotypes or attitudes, that can pollute the homeschool environment. The second thing I would say is comparison is the death of happiness. I so many times I've watched, and Kristen would testify, that we've watched a mom say, I wish my husband was more like you, or I wish my husband was more like so-and-so and was more involved, or whatever. Comparison is the death of happiness. Love the husband you have, not the one you wish you had, right? That humans are flawed, and we don't understand all the dynamics. We don't understand what it takes to mature a person. And Kristen, when somebody had said something similar to that effect, was basically within 24 hours they would be returning you, and I couldn't agree more that not everything is as it appears. So when you're seeing other families and other dynamics, it's be happy for them if they're something that you see as successful, but be careful not to apply that filter to your husband, to your family, to your situation. That being said, let's see. Okay, just kind of reading through. That being said, I would say focus on what you can change. That in a relationship, right? I bring a component to it. My wife brings a component to it. There's a little bit of overlap. Sometimes we expect it to be a full overlap, but it's not. We have two individuals, two very distinct people, and in the middle here, that's where that overlaps. But the majority of what I can affect and change, I can't change Kristen. She can't change me, but we can certainly work on ourselves. And when it comes to this situation, if the Lord has called you to homeschool your children, I would encourage you to homeschool them fully. Know why you homeschool. Know what your expectations are in the homeschool. Don't be afraid to pursue that and move in that direction. And Kristen, as we talked through this last night, it was interesting because I thought I was more of an expert than I am. As we talked through this last night, what she pointed out is the only thing you can really do is turn over if your spouse isn't meeting those expectations or the desires that you would have, turning them over to the Lord and asking Him to change their heart, and then beginning to focus on those parts in you that you can change and what you can bring forward. And so when you homeschool, I would definitely encourage you, if you haven't read the book, Education, Does God Have an Opinion? Understanding why I homeschool, what has God called me to do? Because opportunities will present themselves where if you have a husband or a spouse, a wife that's not supportive in the homeschooling practice, you understanding it, you having a good solid knowledge, or even using this as a, hey, let's talk about what do you think about this type of thing, I think can really help move things forward in getting on the same page. My journey into homeschooling, I had read a book. I was a principal of a private school, and I had read a book by Ray Moore, and about leaving and homeschooling, and it was unschooling, and the whole thing just seemed really exciting to me. And so from that aspect, we didn't really have any conflict. Where we had more conflict had definitely been the faulty assumptions that I brought forward. But because of that, I wasn't necessarily supportive of Kristen in the homeschool arena the way I wish I had been. And so there were definitely times where she had to just turn me over to the Lord and say, you deal with him, he's yours. And then she focused on what she could change, what she could do. And she focused on the homeschool that she really wanted and was within her power to create. I think the if onlys, I have to find happiness. I choose happiness. I say all the time, I'm amazed at how people think they're going to be happy when they attain something, but if they're not happy without it, they almost never are happy with it. And so I would say in your homeschooling, make sure that you understand what it is you want first, what it is you want to accomplish, and what gives you the right to do that. I'm going to talk about in a little bit, but definitely focus on what you can change, know why you homeschool. The other thing that I would say, and sometimes some of us have a lot of confidence when it comes to different things like that, others of us don't. An equation that I like to show people is definitely a little bit of algebra, right? X plus me equals 100%. No matter what my deficiency is, Scripture tells me that if I go to the Lord and I ask for wisdom, that even in my weaknesses, that He will make me, He is my strength and my sufficiency. So in the homeschooling effort, if I bring 95% of talent and skill and ability, but I'm lacking 5%, if I go to Him and ask for wisdom, if I go to Him and ask Him to be the sufficiency in my weakness, He's promised to do that so that I bring 100% of the game. That's the benefit of Christian homeschooling and believers in homeschooling, is that when I rely on Him to be my strength and my sufficiency, He brings the other part of the game. And so if I can only bring 50% to this, then I believe that we have 100% when He fills in the gaps. And He does that when we prayerfully seek Him. We pray for wisdom. If there's a part of your homeschool right now where you're lacking wisdom, try that. Ask Him to give you wisdom in this area. Lord, please give me wisdom to whatever, and watch the supernatural ability that you have to move from 50% to 100%. What if I'm only 5% and I'm lacking in an area that I really need it? Well, then ask Him to give you the sufficiency to bring to 100%. Even if it's just resources or friendships or whatever it is that you need to get to the 100%, I believe that God has given us that right. So, or the promise or the ability to call and ask Him for that. So be careful of our faulty assumptions and expectations. Comparison to death of happiness. Focus on what we can change, that being myself. You will never change your husband. You may motivate him slightly, but the heart change that is what you really desire is only going to come when the Lord begins to do that and stir that. And then number 4, the fourth foundational block that I would say would be allow room for growth. That, you don't know what you don't know. And when we were kids starting out homeschooling 20 some years ago, I had all kinds of faulty assumptions, comparisons, definitely thought any issues we had in our homeschool or in our home was something of Kristen's issues, not my own. And as we've grown and matured and the Lord has worked on our marriage and our family and individually, that paradigm has shifted significantly. So just because something is what it is today, give yourself room for growth. And maybe it's not perfect, but there's as long as that becomes kind of a mantra, perfection isn't expected as long as we see growth, but we're going to allow room for growth. Okay. So hopefully there's that resonates again a little bit. Okay. So what, I remember Kristen and I, a pivotal spot was when we really took a look at the Proverbs 31 wife. And my first thought growing up was when somebody would say Proverbs 31 wife, it was more of the word that would have been equal was submission. And now as I read Proverbs 31, I have a whole different perspective. And if I can, I'm going to read it to you. And I'm going to point out just a couple things. So Proverbs 31:10, the woman who fears the Lord, an excellent wife who can find, she is more precious than jewels. The heart of her husband trusts in her, and he will have no lack of gain. She does him good and not harm all the days of her life. She seeks wool and flax. She works with willing hands. She is like the ships of the merchant. She brings her food from afar. She rises, if I could relate that to homeschooling, she seeks curriculum and books and works with willing hands. She is like the ships of a merchant. She brings her master book's curriculum from afar. Sorry, couldn't resist. She rises while it is yet night. She provides food for her household and portions for her maidens. Now here's what's really cool. She considers a field and buys it. With the fruit of her hand, she plants the vineyard. She dresses herself with strength and makes her arms strong. When you really read this woman, I mean, she's not necessarily soft, right? I mean, she's in charge. She perceives that her merchandise is profitable. Her lamp does not go out at night. She puts her hands at the distaff, and her hands hold the spindle. She opens her hand to the poor. She reaches out her hands to the needy. She is not afraid of snow for her household. For her household are clothed in scarlet. So she's prepared her household. She's evaluated the needs. She knows what she wants. She's gone and got what she needs to cover her family and take care of her family so that they're taken care of when the snow comes. She makes bed coverings for herself. Her clothing is lined in fine linen and purple. Her husband is known in the gates when he sits at the elders of the land. She makes linen garments and sells them. She delivers sashes to the merchant. Strength and dignity are her clothing, and she laughs at the time to come. She opens her mouth to wisdom. She teaches of kindness is in her tongue. She looks well to the ways of her household and does not eat the bread of idleness. Her children rise up and call her blessed, her husband also, and he praises her. Many women have done excellently, but you surpass them all. Charm is deceitful, beauty is vain, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. Give her the fruit of her hands, and let her works praise her in the gates. The first time we read that from a real, Lord, give us wisdom in this, we were trying to make sense of a lot of the ideologies in the homeschool movement that kind of, I don't know, almost elevated man to a position of God over his wife and confused a lot of things, right? And what this began to do was to show us that Kristen, the Lord had given her unbelievable wisdom, unbelievable strengths and talents to do what he had called her to do. And I mean, she had, I know, 5 kids at the time, and she built a business. She was on the phone with customers, processing orders and nursing a baby at the same time, and she rocked it. And she grew a business to the point that I had to come home and work under her. And which was remarkable because the Lord had said, you know, she strengthens herself. She sees a need, she addressed it, she was capable, and she did that. And in the homeschool, it's taken me a lot of years to come to the place where I'm able to say to myself that the Lord had called her to educate the children, and he gave her the strengths and abilities to actually have an amazing impact on our children, and to look for the needs, to address that. And because of faulty assumptions I had and expectations, my only way to feel like I could come into the homeschool was to be boss or to be a bully, or and if I couldn't be boss, then I would have, you know, a bit of a pout or whatnot. And coming to a healthy place of trying to realize a different paradigm. Paradigm is a different way of seeing something. So you can look at the same thing, but there are 2 views, trying to have a different view or a different perspective. So what does health look like for us? And health may look different for you. And you may be looking at this video and saying, oh my goodness, they are really screwed up. Health for us, though, is what would a classroom look like? If we were to send our kids to school, right, you have a classroom and a school and superintendent and all of that, and there's a teacher who managed that classroom. As a parent, I come in and I can either be a supportive parent and an engaged parent, or I can be a disengaged, unsupportive, critical parent. And so the way how we've come to a place of peace, I guess you could say, is I understand that the domain of our school is Kristen's. And I partner with her in the parenting of our children and all of that. And I still take very seriously the spiritual leadership of our home and whatnot, but I don't discount what God has given me in Kristen. And so from that standpoint, I see the classroom belongs to her. And the way that I can be engaged and bless her is to actually come in like a parent that is supportive and involved and caring about the needs of my children. And so she is educating my children, and I come in and I am helping bless her rather than trying to dominate, be critical, pouty, uninterested, that type of thing. So that's the paradigm that we see as more of a healthy. Now when it comes time for curriculum, before when it came to family finances, I didn't allocate, and it would be a struggle to get financing to buy the needs and that type of thing. Now, again, if I'm a supportive and engaged parent, what do you need in your classroom in order for me in order for my children to prosper? So, I think that if we can see it that way, and every family is different, every spectrum is going to be different. So some moms are going to be much more comfortable with dad having a stronger role in the process. There's nothing wrong with that. I think our conflict came with, I wouldn't be engaged as a father unless it was going to be my way. And if I couldn't run it, then I just wouldn't be engaged, and I would be withdrawn. And as we do homeschool conventions and everything, we see so many different families come through that you see the looks in the eyes. You can see a father who's very engaged, supportive, and caring. And when I asked Kristen, well, what does that mean? And I think that's something that you really should define. When you say, I want dad to be engaged in the homeschool, what does that mean? What is your goal in that? And for her, it really is, I want somebody to listen to me as I discuss the plans for next year. I don't want you to choose for me. I don't want you to fix it. I want you just to listen, ask good questions to help me come to good conclusions, and offer advice, but do it freely, the way that you would if you were speaking with a friend, as opposed to speaking to a child, so to speak. And so being engaged at that level, helping to score when working more like a classroom aide, that when we have 5 kids schooling at one time last year, I think it was, the amount of tests and quizzes and papers that needed to be scored definitely needed some help. And so me coming in and helping just score work and help her keep on top of that part. She doesn't need help doing record keeping and managing the classroom and setting up the classroom and all of that. She's fantastic at that. So for me to say, just where can I be a blessing, is something that was beneficial. And then occasionally when one of our kids isn't behaving, in the same way that a teacher of a classroom would send a note home with a student to give to the parent that says, Johnny is misbehaving in class and is not following instructions, could you please speak to him? It's that approach that is working best for us in the process. So if I could speak to my younger self, what I would say to the young Randy in this situation is, just don't be a jerk. Be a blessing and not a curse. That what you need to understand how to serve your wife. Jesus came, and with his disciples, before he was to lay down his life, he took a towel and he washed their feet. And I don't know if any of you have been part of a foot washing ceremony, but man, to have a masculine grown man get down on his hands and knees and wash your feet with humility and service is an incredible experience It's an emotional experience. And I can only imagine as Jesus, the king, right, gets down and washes the feet of his disciples. And then he's called to be my example as a husband. That kind of humility and service. And so many times we kind of bring that expectation and that false assumption that we're the boss, we're the man, the world centers and the universe centers around me. But the example that Christ gave to us as a husband is to serve our wives, to wash their feet, to bless them. And so to the young Randy, I would say, be a blessing to your wife. Find out what her needs are and begin serving her. Lead through servant leadership and help her do what the Lord has called her to do, and don't worry about yourself. The other thing I would encourage you, Randy, to do is to learn to ask good questions and listen with your eyes and your ears, so that when there's a need, you're not you're able to help get to the heart of that need, as opposed to just the assumption of what you think needs to be fixed. Okay, so I know that there is a lot of there's a lot of different scopes and spectrums that families face, and it's almost impossible to say one size fits all. But when you're dealing with dad and you want him to be engaged, the biggest tip I can give you, and this goes for all levels, I would think, you ask your husband maybe, or just try it, but reward the behavior you want. So when your husband gets it right, when he recognizes that you're stressed and he just takes the kids out and gives you a break, and he doesn't fix you, but he just helps you, reward him. Tell him, you know what, I really appreciate that you took the time to do that. That was good. Just that little reward. And I know everybody's different in love languages and all that type of thing, but I think that it's whatever the reward is, that when we reward behavior that's good, the chemical release in the brain is a very the dopamine release is a feel-good drug to our bodies, a hormone that helps us feel better, and we want to feel that again. And so we can help train those around us by rewarding the behavior that we want. And when you fully understand for yourself what it is you want in your homeschool, you've given yourself permission to manage your homeschool, you know what the expectations are for if you want dad to be engaged, what does that engagement look like? And then begin, as if you can communicate that in a way that he'll understand that. And then when he starts to get it right and he's growing in that, make sure that you tell him, that was helpful, that was good, I appreciated that. Okay? All right. Let's see. Okay. I think I've got it. I think I've pretty much covered most of my stuff. I think it's almost impossible to get dad to just say, "Hey, you're going to start helping me," or forcing that process. And sometimes it's a growth process, because if we didn't see it modeled, it's really, we have to find our own way. So one last thing, books like Education, Does God Have an Opinion? Sometimes, and I've ministered to other dads, I would use a book like this and just encourage them to read it if they're a reading dad, or we would have, the conversations about legacy and what is their legacy, what are they doing to disciple their family, to lead their family. But I don't know if that conversation would have been the same if it had come from mom as it was coming from me. But behind me is an Adams chart. And I think in the homeschool conventions, dads will they'll just be perusing, and then they'll come across something incredible like the Adams chart. Now, this Adams chart is a timeline of history from creation to the late 1800s. It chronicles history from biblical history through the flood, through the Tower of Babel, all the way out to different empires and wars and poets and politicians and different things. And so you begin to see that when Christ was crucified, what was going on at China at the time, what was going on in Rome and England. And so, we don't often think that way. So when a dad sits down and he sees this, and it's very, it's very masculine in its approach, in that it looks like a guy thing, something you'd see in a lodge type thing. But this thing opens up to like 23 feet long, and it's huge. You can get it in a poster form, but I've watched so many dads come into the booth, see this thing, and get excited about what's on it, and then they'll buy the copy. So more dads buy Adams charts than moms, in my experience, in homeschool conventions. Well, that's kind of how I got going. Kristen convinced me to go to one homeschool convention, and I remember some of the resources there just really excited me. How to argue and defend my faith, how to lead my family, how to see something like this. And I thought, man, that would be awesome, because I can do that with my kids. It's not that hard to open that up and check it out. Jessica says she's currently reading the book to her husband. He keeps falling asleep. I know. I was just thinking we need to have Israel do an audio book of this, so that you can pop it in the car and play it. Because the material here is just excellent material. All right, I digressed. But sometimes there's good resources that are might catch a dad's eye a little bit and get him excited about that. And so when we went to our first convention, not everything excited me, but man, there was some things there that just started to ignite the possibilities of me beginning to have an active role in training my students. Master Books, we joke a lot here that our curriculum is very masculine in that we like, how do I say it? It's not I don't want you to get it wrong. It's suited well to apologetics and debate and that type of thing. And it's very appealing to men and boys when they see it. Not that it's designed to do that. It's just by the nature of I think Tim and his eye for design and what he likes to see in the materials when he's approving the final product. So a lot of the product we put out, you don't see a lot of frilly and lace in the product, but it works well with dad too, because he's going to understand that, the open and go mentality, the things that they're learning and the approaches to the learning, applied learning and knowledge, to get him excited about that. So that was so far off. Okay. Yeah, there's some great comments in here, and hopefully there were just some nuggets or something that you could take away and apply to your homeschool. But one of the saddest things to me is to a homeschool family that's young and just starting out, and a mom looks at another family and says, I wish my husband would be like that. And you got to give room for growth. You got to allow them the opportunity to mature. And some guys mature faster than others. Some guys may never mature. But that's the place to turn us over to the Lord and say, Lord, I pray for you to give my husband a heart that Christ had to serve his bride. And then you leave it with him, and then you focus on what you can change. And I can say, Kristen, I've learned a lot from her in doing that. And we fought through a lot of faulty expectations and stereotypes and different things to come to a place where we finally realized to give each other space to be individuals. and for me to allow her the freedom to be what God created her to be in the arena that He gave her that those skills. All right. Well, if anything made sense, be sure to comment. I'm going to choose somebody to send a free copy of Education Does God Have an Opinion to. And if you haven't read the book, I would encourage it. I'll also put a post up to the Adams Chart of History. Definitely one of our best-selling products in the company's history, and continues to be. We sell a tremendous amount of that. So hopefully this was helpful, and we will be in contact shortly. God bless everybody.